Stop for a moment, my child, and do not move away from this message too quickly, because what I am about to speak is not ordinary comfort, and it is not a passing word that can wait for another hour. This is the answer to something you cried about when no one else was listening, when your voice was low, when your eyes were full, when even your own heart could not explain what it needed. I am speaking now because I know exactly where your thoughts are wandering at this moment, and I know how often you have looked strong outside while inside you have been carrying questions that became heavier each day. Do not skip this part, because if you walk away too soon, you may leave before hearing the very sentence your spirit has been begging me to say. I know you have heard many voices, many opinions, many empty promises, but listen carefully now, because this moment is different. I am not speaking to a crowd right now. I am speaking to you, directly, personally, deeply, because there are things happening around your life that you do not fully understand yet, and there are hidden battles that cannot be explained by what your eyes can see. I know how tired you are of pretending that everything is under control when inside you have felt yourself sinking quietly. I know how many times you said nothing because you did not even know how to put your pain into words. But I heard every silent cry. I heard the words you could not form. I understood the pain you hid even from yourself. That is why I am interrupting your moment now, because heaven has not ignored what your heart whispered in secret. You thought I left when everything became silent, but I never moved. I stayed in the exact place where you broke. I remained there when the room became quiet, when the messages stopped, when the answers did not come, when the people you expected to understand you failed to notice what was happening inside you. You thought silence meant absence, but my silence was never abandonment. I was there in the moment when your strength dropped and you stared ahead with no clear hope for tomorrow. I was there in the long night, when your mind replayed every disappointment and every fear until sleep felt impossible. I was there when you questioned whether anything ahead could still become good. Even when you felt empty, even when prayer became hard, even when all you could offer was a tired breath and a heavy chest, I stayed. I did not step back because your pain became too much. I did not leave because your questions became difficult. I did not withdraw because your faith became weak. I stayed because my love does not run when you become hard to understand. I remained because I know the full story of your life, and I never judge your worst moment as your final identity. What you thought was the place where everything ended was actually the place where I held you closest, even though you did not feel my hands then. If you leave this message unfinished, you may miss the exact word your heart begged me for during your darkest night, because there were nights when you asked me questions with tears that nobody saw. There were moments when you looked upward in silence and wondered if I still had a reason for keeping you here. There were hidden moments when you became tired of trying to explain yourself, tired of trying to appear strong, tired of carrying weight you never asked for. And in those private moments, you asked me something very important, even if you never said it fully aloud. You asked if I still saw you. You asked if I still cared. You asked if this story could still change. That question reached me completely. Not one part of your pain was lost. Not one tear became meaningless. Not one night passed without my attention resting on you. That is why you must stay with this word now, because what I am saying is connected to prayers you thought disappeared into silence. You have wondered many times if heaven delayed because heaven forgot. But I never forget what rises from a sincere heart. I never ignore pain that calls my name, even when that pain has no perfect language. You gave up on yourself, but I refused to agree with your ending. There were moments when you decided inside that maybe nothing would truly change. Maybe this weakness would remain. Maybe this heaviness would define your future. Maybe this broken chapter would be the strongest thing people would remember about you. But while you were deciding that your strength had ended, I was already guarding what you could not see. While you were losing confidence in your own future, I was protecting parts of your life that were still unfolding. While you were looking at what seemed ruined, I was refusing to let ruin write your final sentence. I know there were days when even getting through simple moments felt difficult. I know there were mornings when you woke up already tired. I know there were hours when your own thoughts became heavy enough to make hope feel distant. But hear me clearly now. Your lowest agreement with despair never became my agreement over your life. I never accepted your broken view as the truth of who you are. I know your weakness, but I also know what still lives inside you. I know your wounds, but I also know what I placed within you before those wounds ever came. I am speaking now because this is not over, even if everything around you told you it was finished. There are voices around you that measured your story by delay. There are memories around you that keep trying to convince you that because something failed once, it must fail again. There are moments behind you that still try to speak louder than what I am preparing ahead. But I am telling you now that the chapter you feared was final has not closed the way you imagined. What looks still is not empty. What feels delayed is not forgotten. What appears silent is not dead. I know you have stared at certain parts of your life and quietly believe they may never rise again. But I do not speak over your future with the same fear your pain taught you. I see beyond this hour. I see beyond this tired season. I see what you cannot yet measure. And because I see it, I tell you again that this is not over. The moment you thought everything became too late was not the end of my work. I am still moving in places you cannot yet describe. Say I stand boldly in faith if you're claiming every promise he has spoken over your life. I saw the night nobody saw. I heard the sentence you never spoke aloud. I know the exact night when your breathing changed because the weight inside you became too much. I know the moment you looked strong before others and then sat alone carrying what you could not explain. I know the hidden fear that rose when you imagined everything staying the same forever. I know the thoughts you pushed away because you did not want anyone to know how deeply tired you had become. I know the moment you looked at your own life and wondered why everything felt heavier than it looked from outside. Nothing about that night escaped me. The room may have been silent, but heaven was not absent. The tears may have fallen quietly, but I counted them fully. The sentence you never finished aloud was heard completely by me because I understand what your spirit says even before your mouth forms it. There is one reason I kept you alive through what almost ended you, and before this message ends, I will reveal it. There were moments closer to collapse than anyone around you realized. There were pressures deeper than your own voice admitted. There were inner battles that could have swallowed your clarity, your peace, even your desire to continue. Yet you are still here, and you must understand that survival was never random. It was not luck. It was not accident. It was not merely your own strength. There is a reason your story did not stop in the place where you thought it might. There is a reason your heart still beats through the very chapter that nearly emptied you. There is a reason I did not allow darkness to make the final decision over your life. You have asked quietly why you remained when certain things felt too hard, and that answer is tied to something still ahead, something not yet complete, something your current pain cannot fully explain yet. But hold this truth now. I do not preserve what has no purpose. I do not carry forward what has no meaning. I kept you because your life still carries something unfinished that heaven has not released. You thought your worst chapter pushed me away, but that was where I held you the closest. When you felt ashamed of how weak you became, I was not stepping away. When you thought your questions were too heavy, I was not offended. When you felt emotionally tired, spiritually quiet, mentally stretched, I did not mark that as failure. I held you through what you did not know how to survive. I stayed near when your own words became few. I remained when others misunderstood your silence. I watched carefully when you thought nobody noticed how hard you were fighting just to remain steady. And even now, I am still here, not because you have everything together, but because my love was never built on your perfect strength. Listen carefully now, because this part matters deeply. The chapter you feared most is not the chapter that removed you from my hands. It became the chapter where my hands refused to loosen their hold. My child, come closer in your heart and listen carefully, because I want to begin where you have tried hardest to hide from everyone, even from yourself. I am not beginning with a part of you that smiles when others are watching. I am not beginning with the words you use when someone asks if you are fine, and you answer quickly because you do not want to explain the heaviness inside you. I am beginning with the quiet place where your strength became thin, where your thoughts became heavy, where your heart sat in silence, because even speaking felt exhausting. I know that place fully. I know the private collapse you never described correctly because even you struggled to understand how deeply tired you had become. I know the exact season when you were surrounded by ordinary moments, yet inside you felt as if something had fallen apart in slow silence. I saw the day you continued doing what was expected while your spirit was already sinking beneath the surface. I saw how you answered messages, completed responsibilities, stood before people, and still carried an ache no one recognized. You thought your struggle had no witness because nobody around you noticed how much effort it took just to remain present. But I was there before the first tear formed, before the first sigh escaped, before the first silent question rose in your chest. Heaven did not discover your pain late. I was already near when your heart first began to feel tired in ways words could not explain. Please support our channel. Our work is to bring happiness in your life and devotion to God. And if you want, you can donate to us via given link in description or pinned comment to show your support. You thought nobody knew how tired your soul became, but I counted every breath you struggled to take. I know that sentence reaches the deepest part of you because there were moments when breathing itself felt heavier than usual, not because your body forgot how, but because your heart carried more than it could name. There were nights when you lay awake, staring into darkness, not always crying loudly, not always saying much, but carrying a weight that pressed inward until sleep felt distant. Some nights tears came quietly. Other nights even tears would not come because numbness had settled so deeply that you no longer knew whether you were sad, exhausted, disappointed, or simply empty. You feared what that numbness meant. You wondered why the things that once moved you no longer reached you the same way. You noticed how joy became difficult to feel fully, how hope became cautious, how even simple moments sometimes felt far away. But I knew exactly what was happening inside you. I knew when your emotions became tired from carrying too much without release. I knew when disappointment layered itself so slowly that one burden alone did not seem unbearable, but many together became almost too much. And still, while you wondered if anyone understood, I was measuring every quiet struggle with perfect attention. I saw the nights of silent crying that nobody else heard. I saw the way you tried to keep the sound low because you did not want anyone nearby to ask questions you were not ready to answer. I saw how you wiped your face before stepping out again, how you practiced calmness before speaking, how you taught yourself to appear steady because you did not know how to explain why your heart felt fragile. There were nights when tears came because of one clear reason, but there were also nights when tears came because many small pains had gathered until one ordinary moment became too heavy. I saw every one of those moments. I saw when memories returned unexpectedly and touched wounds you thought had become quiet. I saw when fear about tomorrow arrived without warning. I saw when disappointment over what did not happen sat beside disappointment over what had already happened. You never had to explain those tears for me to understand them. I knew what each one carried. Not one tear fell without meaning. Not one tear was hidden from me, even when you turned your face away from everyone else. I also saw the days when emotional numbness frightened you more than tears did. Tears at least felt like release, but numbness made you wonder whether your heart had become too tired to respond. There were moments when people laughed near you and you smiled because you knew how to respond, but inside you felt distant from the moment itself. There were days when someone spoke kindly to you and you appreciated it, yet still felt unable to receive comfort deeply. There were times when you wanted to feel hopeful but found yourself unable to reach it fully because disappointment had trained your heart to stay guarded. I did not mistake that numbness for indifference. I knew it was exhaustion. I knew it was the result of carrying too many inner questions without enough safe places to release them. I knew it was the result of hoping repeatedly while also fearing fresh pain. I knew that beneath that numbness your heart still cared deeply, still longed deeply, still wanted peace, still wanted clarity, still wanted rest. You smiled before people, but inside you broke in places nobody saw. You learned how to answer kindly while carrying pressure. You learned how to sit in conversations while another part of your mind was fighting heaviness quietly. You learned how to appear available while inwardly feeling distant from yourself. There were times when people praised your strength without knowing how close you felt to collapsing privately. There were moments when someone assumed you were handling everything well simply because you remained polite. But I saw the hidden cost of every smile you offered when your spirit felt weak. I saw the effort it took to remain gentle when your own thoughts were loud. I saw how often you protected others from your pain because you did not want to become a burden. I saw how often you chose silence because explaining your inner state felt harder than enduring it quietly. Yet none of that silence hid you from me. Your smile never confused heaven. Your calm voice never prevented me from seeing the tremble underneath. There were hidden breakdowns you thought happened unnoticed, but I witnessed every one of them. I saw the moment when you sat alone after everyone else had gone quiet, and finally allowed your face to reflect what your heart had been holding all day. I saw when your shoulders lowered because there was no longer a reason to appear strong for anyone nearby. I saw when your thoughts became honest in solitude. I saw the moments when you looked ahead and quietly wondered how much longer you could carry certain feelings without relief. I saw when discouragement tried to persuade you that nothing significant would change. I saw when your own reflection looked unfamiliar because you had become tired in ways deeper than appearance could explain. I did not turn my face from any of it. Heaven did not step away because your weakness became visible. I did not wait for you to recover before drawing near. I was present precisely there, in the hidden collapse, in the private breath, in the silent stare, in the tired heart that did not know how to ask for help clearly. Do not believe that silence around you meant silence above you. Heaven did not turn away during that season. While you wondered why everything felt quiet, I was still holding every fragile part of your life with care you could not yet see. While you feared being forgotten, I was refusing to let despair define you. While your thoughts became uncertain, my attention remained steady. I did not withdraw because your prayers became shorter. I did not move away because some days all you offered me was exhaustion. Even when words failed you, I understood the prayer inside your breath. Even when all you could offer was stillness, I remained near enough to hear what your spirit carried. There were days when you believed your weakness made you harder to reach, but weakness never blocks my nearness. Weakness often becomes the place where I stay closest because there you stop pretending and your soul speaks honestly. My child, I want you to trust this slowly and deeply. The worst private moments of your life did not make me uncertain about you. I did not look at your collapse and decide to step back. I looked at your collapse and stayed nearer than before. When you doubted your own strength, I was not measuring your worth by how well you held yourself together. When you feared becoming too tired, I was not offended by your exhaustion. When your heart became confused, I was not threatened by your questions. I know human hearts fully. I know how pain accumulates. I know how hope can become tired when waiting becomes long. I know how disappointment can quietly train a person to expect less than what they once prayed for. And because I know all this, I speak gently to you now. I saw every hidden breakdown, and not one of them pushed me away. The season you thought exposed only weakness also revealed something else to heaven, that even while tired, even while uncertain, even while quiet, you still remained here. Even when your strength felt small, you did not disappear. Even when hope felt weak, something inside you still kept breathing toward tomorrow. Even when you could not explain why, you still kept moving through ordinary hours one moment at a time. I saw that too. I saw the quiet courage hidden inside your tiredness. I saw the small decision to continue when continuing felt ordinary to others but costly to you. I saw every unseen act of endurance. And I want you to know now that none of it was invisible to me. None of it was wasted. None of it happened outside my sight. So let your heart rest in this truth now. The private season did not happen alone. I was there before the tears, during the silence, inside the numbness, beside the hidden smile, near the quiet collapse, through every breath that felt difficult. And I am still here now, speaking not as one who discovered your pain late, but as one who never left the room where your soul struggled most. My child, now I want to speak to the part of your story that very few people understood, because there came a season when you did not only feel tired, you quietly began to surrender inside. It did not happen in one dramatic moment. It happened slowly, almost unnoticed, like light fading at the end of a day until suddenly you realized how dark your thoughts had become. At first you still tried to hope in the same way you always had. You still looked ahead and told yourself that perhaps tomorrow would carry relief, perhaps something would shift, perhaps the weight would become lighter. But after enough disappointment, after enough waiting, after enough inner battles that nobody knew how to measure, your heart began to lower its expectations little by little. You still moved through your days. You still answered people. You still carried responsibilities. But inside you began making quiet agreements with discouragement. You stopped imagining certain things changing because expecting change started to feel painful. You stopped speaking certain hopes aloud because saying them made you fear fresh disappointment. You did not call it surrender at first, but I saw exactly when your mind began telling your heart not to expect too much anymore. I saw the moment you started protecting yourself by assuming less, by preparing for silence, by telling yourself that maybe this was simply how things would remain. Yet even while you were slowly stepping back inside yourself, I did not step back from you. Comment: Jesus is more than enough for me if he fills every empty space in your soul. There were moments when you stopped praying fully, not because you stopped believing I existed, but because you became tired of reaching for words that felt heavy in your mouth. Some days you still prayed, but your prayer became short because your energy was short. Some nights you wanted to say more, but all that came out was silence and a tired breath. Sometimes you sat with thoughts you wanted to bring to me, but your heart felt too weary to shape them into language. There were also moments when you began praying carefully, holding back deeper desires because part of you no longer wanted to expose hope too openly. You feared what it would feel like if another answer delayed, if another silence stretched longer, if another longing remained untouched. So you learned to pray with less detail, less expectation, less openness than before. Yet even in those unfinished prayers, I heard everything you could not say. Even when your words became few, I understood what was hidden beneath them. I never measured your sincerity by the length of your prayer. I heard the ache inside the pauses. I heard the fatigue behind the silence. I heard the part of you that still longed for help even while another part of you feared asking again. There were times when you no longer expected change, and that quiet loss of expectation touched your heart more deeply than others realized. Outwardly, life continued, but inwardly you began telling yourself not to imagine too much because imagining had become difficult. You looked at certain situations and thought perhaps they would remain exactly as they were. You looked at certain wounds and thought perhaps they would never fully soften. You looked at certain unanswered places and quietly accepted delay as if delay had become permanent truth. You did not always speak that surrender aloud, but I saw it forming. I saw how disappointment taught your heart caution. I saw how waiting taught your spirit to lower its voice. I saw how repeated heaviness made you wonder whether anything truly new could still enter your life. Yet even while you mentally accepted less than what your soul once hoped for, I did not allow your future to shrink to the size of your current pain. My child, I want you to hear this slowly because it is deeply important. When your hands dropped, mine did not. When you became too tired to hold certain hopes firmly, I still held them. When you loosened your grip because strength failed, my grip remained steady. When you no longer knew how to stand against what weighed on you, I continued standing where you could not see. You thought your weakness created emptiness, but even in your weakest hour, unseen battles were still being fought around you. There were things pressing against your peace that never fully reached you because I stood between them and your heart. There were doors that did not open because I refused to allow harm to arrive disguised as relief. There were moments when your mind came close to darker conclusions, yet I guarded your inner life more carefully than you knew. There were nights when despair approached more strongly than you realized, but I did not permit it to write the ending your pain suggested. Even when you could not sense me, I was actively preserving what you had no strength left to defend. You lost strength in ways that even you struggled to explain. It was not only physical tiredness. It was deeper than that. It was a kind of weariness that reached thought, memory, expectation, and emotion all at once. It touched how you saw tomorrow. It touched how you understood yourself. It touched how you responded to ordinary moments. Things that once felt simple became heavier because your heart was carrying more than it admitted. Some mornings began with tiredness before the day even started. Some evenings ended with a heaviness you could not fully trace to one cause because many quiet disappointments had gathered together. And while you wondered whether you were becoming weaker than before, I was not disappointed in you. I understood that this was not rebellion. It was exhaustion. It was the human soul reaching a point where it could no longer pretend that all burdens were easy to carry. There were unseen battles during that season that you never fully recognized because not every battle announces itself clearly. Some battles happened in your thoughts, where hopelessness tried to settle as truth. Some battles happened in memory, where old pain tried to define your future again. Some battles happened through voices around you that unknowingly reinforced your fears. Some battles came through delay itself, because delay often whispers that nothing is moving when much is moving beneath the surface. But while you saw stillness, I saw movement. While you saw silence, I was already preserving what mattered ahead. While you feared that nothing remained active, I was refusing to let your future collapse under the weight of one difficult season. There were unseen protections surrounding moments you thought were empty. There were unseen restraints placed on things that would have harmed you if they had entered too soon. You may remember moments when you always stopped expecting anything meaningful at all. Perhaps you still smiled politely. Perhaps you still continued routine. But inwardly you had begun telling yourself not to hope too strongly. Yet, my child, your lowered expectation never became my decision for your future. I did not rewrite your story according to the size of your discouragement. I did not agree with the conclusion your pain suggested. Even when you believed little could change, I continued arranging what you could not yet imagine. Even when your prayers weakened, I did not weaken in care. Even when your confidence thinned, my intention remained whole. There were also moments when you blamed yourself for becoming tired, as if needing rest meant failure. But hear me clearly now. The season when your strength faded did not make you less precious to me. The season when your mind surrendered certain expectations did not reduce my patience with you. I know how repeated strain shapes human hearts. I know how long waiting can drain courage. I know how many disappointments can gather before one soul finally whispers inwardly, I cannot keep reaching the same way. And because I know that fully, I did not condemn you in those moments. I stayed near, not with accusation, but with steady care. While you believed little remained in your hands, I was still holding what mattered most. I held your future intact when your vision for it blurred. I held your peace in moments when fear pressed hard. I held your name when you questioned your worth. I held open possibilities that your tired mind no longer believed possible. I held together pieces you thought were already too damaged. That is why you are still here now, hearing this truth, because what you released in weakness did not fall into emptiness. It fell into my hands. When your hands dropped, mine did not. When your prayer weakened, my listening did not. When your expectation faded, my intention did not. When your courage trembled, my faithfulness remained unshaken. I need this truth to settle deeply in you, because many times you judged that season only by how weak you felt, but heaven also remembers how closely I guarded you there. I guarded you when you could not guard yourself fully. I kept what you thought was slipping away. I remained present while you mentally surrendered. And even now, I speak this not only to comfort you, but to show you that your weakest season never became an abandoned season. It became one more place where my unseen strength quietly carried what your own hands could no longer hold. My child, there was a season when your heart did not leave me with loud words, but it slowly stepped back in silence. And I want to speak about that gently, because I know how misunderstood that season has been, even by you. There were days when you still remembered me, still believed I existed, still carried some awareness of my presence, yet emotionally you felt far away, as if something inside you no longer knew how to come close in the way it once did. It was not that you made a clear decision to reject me. It was that pain became loud, disappointment became heavy, and your inner life became tired enough that closeness itself felt difficult. You still moved through ordinary life, but spiritually there were moments when your heart no longer reached naturally the way it once had. Prayer became effort. Stillness became complicated. Even simple faith began to feel unfamiliar because your mind carried too many questions, and your emotions had become worn down by things you never fully explained to anyone. Yet I saw all of it without anger, without distance, without accusation. I knew exactly what was happening beneath your silence, and I never confused your tiredness with rejection. You walked away in pain, not rebellion, and I understood the difference. The truth matters deeply because there were moments when even you judged yourself harshly, wondering why your heart felt slower, quieter, less responsive than before. You remembered seasons when prayer came easier, when trust rose faster, when hope felt more natural, and then you noticed how different your spirit felt during those harder days. You wondered why your words became fewer. You wondered why worship sometimes felt distant. You wondered why even when you wanted to feel close, something inside you remained heavy and cautious. But I saw what your heart was carrying. I saw that you were not turning away because you no longer cared. You were stepping back because pain had reached places inside you that made openness difficult. You were wounded in ways that affected how you approached even sacred things. You were tired enough that silence felt safer than trying to explain everything. And because I knew the true reason, I stayed near with tenderness, not judgment. There were seasons when your prayer life became dry, and you noticed it before anyone else could. Sometimes you sat in silence, wanting to pray but not knowing how to begin. Sometimes you started speaking and stopped because your thoughts felt scattered. Sometimes the words came, but they felt thin, almost mechanical, as though your spirit was trying to move while your emotions lagged behind. There were also moments when prayer became only short sentences because long prayers felt impossible. A quiet "help me," a tired breath, a few unfinished thoughts. That was all you had some days. And there were days when even that felt difficult because your mind carried too much uncertainty. But hear me carefully, I never rejected those dry prayers. I never turned away because your words were few. I never required polished language from a weary soul. Even when your prayer sounded fragile, I heard what your heart could not fully express. Even when your mouth was silent, I listened to what your spirit still carried beneath the dryness. Type "You are my true guide, Lord," if His hand directs every step you take. And share this video. My child, there are only moments left before what I promised begins to move, and that is why I have drawn you here now, at this exact second, before your thoughts wander again, before doubt speaks again, before fear convinces you that nothing is changing. I need your full attention because what is happening around you is not ordinary, and what you are hearing now is not random sound passing through your ears. I am speaking because heaven has marked this moment with intention. I did not allow you to arrive here by accident. I interrupted your routine, your scrolling, your thinking, your distractions, because there is something pressing upon this hour that you must hear with your spirit, and not merely with your mind. The next few moments matter more than you understand right now, because while you have been wondering whether anything is moving, whether your prayers have reached beyond the ceiling, whether your long waiting has been ignored, I tell you now that movement has already begun where your eyes cannot yet reach. There are shifts taking place beyond your sight, and what felt silent to you was never empty. What felt delayed to you was never abandoned. Even now, while you listen, while your heart tries to understand whether this word belongs to you. Unseen things are aligning, doors are adjusting, resistance is weakening, and pieces that once stood apart are being brought together under my hand. I know how many times you almost stopped believing. I know how many times you smiled in front of others while inside you felt tired beyond words. I know the private questions you asked when no one was near enough to hear them. I know how often you wondered why others moved ahead while your own answer remained hidden. I know the exact nights when your chest felt heavy and you looked upward in silence because you no longer had strength to pray with words. I watched every tear when nobody knew you were breaking. Not one tear escaped my sight. Not one trembling breath was ignored. Not one moment of hidden pain passed without my presence near you. Even when you thought heaven was silent, I was counting every wound, every insult, every time you held yourself together when you felt like falling apart. I was not absent in your hardest hours. I was nearer than your own breath, holding back things you did not see, stopping outcomes that would have damaged what I am preparing now. This is why I need you to remain here and not skip what I am saying, because the final words I will place before you carry confirmation your spirit has been asking for in secret. If you leave too quickly, you may miss the very sentence your heart has waited to hear. Do not let impatience steal what endurance has brought you close enough to receive. I know how quickly your mind tries to move when pain has trained you to expect disappointment. But stay here now, because there is a reason I am speaking with urgency. Before this day closes, your spirit will understand why I delayed. Before this day ends, you will begin to sense why certain doors refused to open when you begged for them, why certain people disappeared when you needed support, why certain answers came slower than your tears expected. You called it delay. I called it positioning. You thought you were being left behind, but I was placing you where your blessing would not be destroyed the moment it arrived. What I release now cannot be blocked by people, delay, history, or opposition. Hear that deeply, because too much of your pain has come from believing that human decisions have final power over what I promised. They do not. Human voices can speak, reject, mock, and misjudge, but they do not sit above my word. Circumstances can appear closed, but they do not cancel what I have already spoken over your life. The years that seem lost are not stronger than what I can restore. The mistakes behind you are not stronger than the mercy I carry toward you now. Even opposition that looked powerful was only permitted for a season because there were things inside you that had to become stronger before what is coming could safely rest upon your life. And yes, the same people who laughed at your waiting are about to witness why I made you stay still. They saw your silence and mistook it for weakness. They saw your restraint and thought you had no answer. They saw your slow season and assumed your story had ended in disappointment. But they did not know I was teaching you how to stand when nothing around you gave proof. They did not know I was building strength in places applause could not reach. They did not know I allowed silence because some miracles mature where no one is watching. I let them speak because their voices could not alter my timing. I let them misunderstand because their understanding was never required for my plan to move. What they called failure was hidden formation. What they mocked was protected preparation. What they judged too early was still under my hand. Something has already started shifting behind the scenes while you are listening now. This is not language to comfort you without substance. This is reality moving beyond your visible world. The atmosphere around what concerns you is not the same as it was before this hour began. Prayer is changing direction. Delays are loosening their hold. What looked fixed is not fixed. What seemed permanent is already being touched by my authority. You may not yet see visible evidence, but spiritual movement often begins before natural proof appears. That is why I tell you not to trust only what your eyes report today. Trust what my voice is placing inside you now. There are answers already in motion that do not need your panic to arrive. There are doors already responding to words you prayed weeks ago, months ago, even years ago, when you thought heaven had forgotten the sound of your voice. Say God is faithful always, even if you're still waiting on the promise. I know the burden you carry from waiting too long. Waiting can make even strong hearts tired. Waiting can make hope feel dangerous because disappointment teaches caution. But listen carefully. The reason I asked you to hold on was because what I planned could not be handed to you while your surroundings still contained certain dangers. There were conversations I prevented, alliances I delayed, hidden motives I exposed only by keeping you still longer than you wanted. Had I moved when you demanded, you would have celebrated too early and suffered deeply later. Had I opened everything when you first cried out, you would have stepped into something before your strength was ready to carry it. So I held you, even when you called it painful. I slowed the moment, even when you called it silence. I guarded what belonged to you until the wrong hands lost access. Now feel the seriousness of this hour, because this message is not casual comfort. Heaven intentionally stopped you here because your heart has entered a narrow moment between what has been and what is beginning. You are closer than you realize to the part you nearly gave up waiting for. That is why pressure increased recently. That is why thoughts became heavier just before now. Often when breakthrough nears, confusion tries hardest to speak. Often when my answer approaches, discouragement tries to arrive first. But do not mistake increased pressure for abandonment. It often means the old season knows it cannot continue much longer. There are some things you still do not understand, and that is why I ask you again not to leave too quickly from this word. Remain steady for these next moments, because what I reveal next explains why I let them mock you. There were lessons hidden in the laughter you endured. There were exposures hidden in the rejection you survived. There were names I allowed to distance themselves because they could not enter what I am now preparing. There were voices I allowed to misjudge you because their approval would have tied your peace to unstable hands. I was teaching you to survive without leaning on what could not carry your future. And now, before your heart questions again whether this truly belongs to you, hear me clearly. I have not changed my mind concerning you. I have not withdrawn because time passed. I have not forgotten because others moved first. I am not late. I am exact. I am not absent. I am deliberate. I am not watching from afar. I am moving nearer than you know. What you thought was empty time hath been full of my arrangement. What you thought was stillness hath been preparation beneath the surface. What you thought was ending has been the tightening of moments before release. So hold on for these next moments, because what I reveal next explains why I let them mock you. My child, the reason heaven allowed the delay is because what you asked me for could not arrive safely at the moment you first desired it. I know you measured that season through pain, through unanswered prayers, through long nights when you searched for signs that something was changing and found only silence staring back at you. I know there were moments when you wondered if your voice had become too weak to reach me, if perhaps your prayers had risen but found no answer because I had chosen another path. But listen carefully now, because what felt like stillness was never emptiness, and what looked like delay was never my rejection of you. I did not step away from your need. I did not postpone your blessing because I forgot your tears. I allowed time because time itself was protecting what I intended to place into your hands. If I had opened certain doors when you begged me to, you would have stepped through carrying burdens that would have turned blessing into pressure, and what I wanted to establish with peace would have become heavy before it matured. I know you did not understand that while waiting, because pain always makes silence feel longer than it truly is. Yet even then my hand was active in ways your eyes could not read. Please support our channel. Our work is to bring happiness in your life and devotion to God. And if you want, you can donate to us via given link in description or pinned comment to show your support. You remember how many times you stood at the edge of expectation, believing something would happen that week, that month, that season, and when it did not, your heart slowly learned how to smile while disappointment settled deeper than words. You remember how often you prepared yourself emotionally for change, only to watch nothing visible arrive. You tried to stay faithful, but there were nights when your faith felt tired, when your own spirit asked quietly, "How much longer must I remain here? Why does everything around me seem paused while others move forward? Why do doors open for others while mine remain shut?" I heard every one of those questions, even the ones you never spoke aloud. I do not condemn your weakness in those moments because I know the weight of waiting when human strength is stretched thin. Though what you called delay, I called careful construction. What you interpreted as closed space, I recognized as sacred preparation. The answer did not come when expected because the structure around your life was still being arranged beneath the surface. There was hidden spiritual work happening while you thought nothing was moving. While your visible world looked unchanged, invisible things were being repositioned. Conversations you never heard were being redirected. Plans formed against you were being weakened before they reached your path. Hearts that carried wrong intentions were being exposed without you knowing it. Timings were being adjusted so that what comes next would meet you in the right hour, and not in a dangerous one. You looked at silence and assumed stillness, but silence often hides the loudest work of heaven. The seed under soil appears inactive, yet beneath the darkness roots are reaching deeper than the eye can measure. That is how many parts of your waiting season unfolded. While you asked where the answer was, I was strengthening roots you could not yet see, because blessings without roots become unstable when pressure arrives. Some doors had to stay closed because wrong people were watching. This is something you could not fully understand while asking why certain opportunities disappeared, why certain responses never returned, why certain invitations faded just when you hoped they would become permanent. But had some doors opened too soon? Eyes that carried envy, control, and hidden motives would have entered spaces they were never meant to touch. I protected many beginnings by refusing early exposure. I kept some blessings hidden because not everyone around you celebrated your growth with a clean heart. Some people smiled near you while privately waiting for your failure to confirm their own opinions. Some watched your silence and assumed heaven had turned away from you. But what they did not know was that I was deliberately covering what belonged to you until their influence no longer had access. You called certain clothed moments loss, but many were protection. You mourned over what did not happen because you thought that was your answer leaving. Yet often it was danger being removed before it settled near your future. I know you cried over people who stepped back, over connections that changed, over plans that seemed certain and then suddenly dissolved. But many departures happened because their presence could not remain where I am taking you. Had they stayed, they would have spoken out over what I intended to nurture in silence. Had they remained close, they would have pressed their fear into your decisions. So I allowed distance, not because I wanted you lonely, but because peace sometimes begins when unnecessary voices lose influence. The painful waiting season was not wasted, though it often felt cruel while you lived inside it. I know how deeply that season marked you. There were mornings when you woke already tired because disappointment had become familiar. There were moments when you looked normal to others while inside you felt like something fragile was struggling not to collapse. You kept functioning, kept speaking kindly, kept doing what was required, but inwardly you carried unanswered weight that no one around you fully understood. You watched others celebrate things you had prayed for and wondered if your own turn had been forgotten. You tried not to compare, yet your heart still hurt when visible answers seemed to visit everyone except you. But hear me now. Your waiting was not evidence of being overlooked. It was evidence that what I prepared required deeper timing than what you could see. Delay was not rejection but preparation. Rejection pushes away without purpose. Preparation holds back with intention. Rejection abandons. Reverend Hales. Rejection closes with no future. Preparation closes because future must be guarded until it can stand. I never rejected the cry of your heart. I simply refused to hand you something before the unseen foundations were strong enough to carry its weight. Some blessings appear beautiful when imagined but demand strength when lived. I knew what your future would require emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. That is why some seasons became longer than expected. I was not punishing you through silence. I was strengthening you through it. Inside that silence, I've also revealed things about yourself that noise would have hidden. You learned how much of your peace had depended on visible answers. You learned how quickly fear tried to rise when certainty disappeared. You learned how deeply human approval had shaped some of your expectations. Silence exposed these things not to shame you, but to free you from leaning on what cannot hold your future. Many people ask for blessing, but few understand that blessing resting on unstable inner ground becomes another source of fear. So I used quiet places to deepen you. I allowed hidden seasons because roots are strengthened where applause cannot reach. Your enemies misread silence as defeat. Those who doubted you looked at your still season and decided nothing important would happen for you. They interpreted your waiting as proof that your prayers had failed. They watched you remain quiet and assumed your story had already reached its limit. Some even became comfortable believing they understood your outcome because they judge only what was visible. But silence in your life was never defeat. Silence was concealment. Silence was me covering what I was building until it could stand without interference. They mistook stillness for weakness because they did not know what heaven does when it becomes quiet around a chosen moment. Even you sometimes misread your own silence. There were days when you thought your own calm meant nothing was left to hope for. But often the reason I kept you still was because too much movement around you would have distracted you from the deeper work within you. I needed you to survive without constant signs. I needed your trust to grow where evidence was absent. I needed you to know that my word remains true even when circumstances delay their agreement. This is not because I delight in making you wait, but because there are truths only silence teaches deeply. Unseen protection lived inside that silence. The answer delayed because danger had not fully passed. The response paused because timing still held hidden complications. The opportunity slowed because certain names still had influence they should not carry into your next season. I shielded you from things you never knew almost touched your path. I stopped conversations before they reached you. I blocked outcomes that would have looked exciting at first but wounded you later. I delayed because protection often looks like absence until the right moment arrives and suddenly what once felt empty reveals itself as mercy. So when you remember that painful season, do not call it abandoned ground. Call it guarded ground. Call it the place where heaven worked quietly while your heart learned endurance. Call it the season where tears watered roots you did not know were growing. Call it the place where silence held more love than you understood at the time. Because now you are beginning to see that my delays were never careless. They were exact. They were measured. They were protective. And what remained closed under my hand did not remain closed because I forgot you, but because I loved what I promised too much to release it before the right hour arrived. My child, you have asked within yourself many times why I allowed certain voices to rise against you, why I remained quiet when words were spoken that wounded your spirit, why I permitted laughter to surround moments when your heart was already carrying enough pain. There were nights when you replayed conversations in your mind, wondering why those who once stood near you could speak as though your struggle was entertainment, as though your waiting gave them permission to decide your worth. You wondered why I did not interrupt them immediately, why I did not silence them the moment they judged what they did not understand. But hear me now with full attention. Mockery was permitted temporarily, not because I agreed with what they said, not because I overlooked the pain it caused you, and not because their voices held power above my will. I allowed it because what rises from a person when they think another is delayed reveals more than they intend to show. Their laughter uncovered what politeness had hidden. Their words exposed hearts they themselves had not fully seen. And before I move openly, I'd often allow hidden intentions to surface so truth stands uncovered before the moment of reversal begins. What you experienced was not meaningless humiliation. I know how deeply it affected you. I know how certain words stayed longer than the moment in which they were spoken. I know how even after smiles faded and people moved on, your spirit still carried the echo of what was said. There were moments when you questioned yourself because repeated doubt from others can become heavy when your own answer has not yet appeared. You asked whether perhaps they were right, whether perhaps your silence truly meant nothing was coming, whether perhaps your season had become proof that your expectation had failed. But what they called failure was a moment they did not understand. They looked at unfinished ground and spoke as if the story had already ended. They judged a seed before harvest. They mocked a process still hidden beneath the soil. Their laughter exposed hearts, intentions, and hidden pride. Some who laughed were not simply reacting to your delay. They were revealing what they carried inside themselves. Pride often speaks loudest when another person is waiting, because pride mistakes temporary visibility for permanent superiority. They looked at where they stood and assumed that because your answer had not arrived yet, they understood your future better than I did. Some secretly felt stronger because they saw you quiet. Some felt justified because your silence allowed them to believe they were ahead in ways that mattered. Some spoke lightly, but underneath their words was the hidden comfort they found in seeing you remain in a place they believed you would never leave. They did not realize that every careless word was exposing them before me more clearly than before you. I watched every insult silently. Not one sentence escaped my hearing. Not one glance of mockery passed unnoticed. Not one hidden conversation happened outside my sight. Even the words spoken when your name was not present were heard fully before heaven. I know the exact tone in which they laughed. I know the moments when they smiled outwardly, but inwardly enjoyed your uncertainty. I know the times they pretended concern while privately feeding doubt. My silence during those moments did not mean absence. It meant I was allowing truth to stand long enough to reveal itself completely. If I had interrupted too early, some hidden things would have remained covered. If I had answered instantly, some hearts would have stayed concealed beneath appearance. But I let time stretch because time reveals what words often hide. Type Jesus, lead me forward if you're ready to follow wherever He calls. You remember moments when humiliation felt especially sharp because it came from places where you expected understanding. That pain cut deeper than public opposition because it arrived through familiar voices, through people you thought would protect your spirit instead of testing it. Some laughed not loudly, but subtly, through disbelief, through dismissive tone, through comments that made your waiting feel small. Some questioned your faith while pretending to advise you. Some treated your patience as weakness because they only understand movement that can be seen immediately. Yet I tell you now, every insult became part of evidence before divine reversal. Nothing they released into your season disappeared. It all stood recorded, not because I delight in punishment, but because truth matters before the moment when I act openly. Every betrayal became reported evidence before divine reversal. Every promise broken, every moment someone withdrew when you needed support, every time trust was handled carelessly, every season someone watched you struggle and chose distance instead of compassion, none of it vanished into emptiness. Heaven does not forget what earth treats casually. The betrayal that made you question your own discernment, the rejection that came after you gave sincerity, the moments when your kindness was answered with indifference, all of it stood before me long before you understood why it was permitted. I did not lose sight of your wounded places simply because I did not answer immediately. Often when I delay response, it is because the full measure of what must be revealed has not yet surfaced. The people who doubted you unknowingly stood before coming miracle. This is what they could not understand. They judged your unfinished chapter while standing near a moment already marked by heaven. They looked at your silence and assumed it was the whole story, not knowing they were speaking near the edge of something they had no power to stop. They laughed in a chapter that was never final. They commented in a moment that still belonged to preparation. They believed your stillness meant limitation, while I knew your stillness was carrying hidden movement beneath it. Many people speak boldly when they think heaven is quiet because they mistake quietness for conclusion. But my quietness has often stood closest to my strongest movement. Some of those who doubted you would have spoken differently had they understood how near your answer already was. Some would have guarded their words had they known. They were speaking beside a season that would soon shift. But human judgment often rushes ahead of wisdom. They measured with sight only. They concluded with incomplete understanding. And because they did not see what I concealed, they allowed their own hearts to speak too freely. Humiliation had purpose, though that truth was painful while you lived through it. I know this is difficult for your heart because humiliation feels personal, and often it reaches places pride never expected to be touched. But humiliation stripped away certain dependencies inside you that comfort could not remove. It taught you how fragile human approval truly is. It showed you how quickly people build conclusions from incomplete scenes. It forced your heart to stand before me without leaning so heavily on voices around you. If everyone had affirmed you during delay, you might never have learned how deeply your peace depended on external agreement. But in those moments when support became thin, you discovered how necessary my voice must become when others misunderstand. This does not mean I delighted in your pain. I did not rejoice when your heart tightened because of careless words. I did not ignore your tears afterward. I was present in every moment you sat quietly after being wounded, in every hour when your thoughts replayed what was said, in every attempt you made to stay composed while inwardly feeling small. I saw the way humiliation followed you into private hours, how even after conversation ended, your mind kept carrying what others had released. Yet even there, purpose moved quietly. I was teaching you to survive seasons where applause disappears, because what I place in your future cannot rest safely in someone whose peace collapses every time approval changes. Their mockery also separated hearts around you. Some revealed who they were through how they responded to your waiting. Those who carried compassion stayed gentle even when they did not understand everything. Those who carried pride became careless with your pain. Delay became a mirror around you. It showed who honored process and who only honored visible success. It revealed who could stand near unfinished chapters without speaking harm. And that revelation matters, because not everyone who stands near you in delay can stand near you in fulfillment. So do not think the laughter meant heaven had forgotten your name. It meant hidden things were surfacing before the shift. It meant hearts were declaring themselves before the answer arrived. It meant evidence was forming before reversal began. And now what they misread as defeat will become one of the clearest signs that they never understood what my silence was doing. Because, my child, silence was never surrender. Silence was witness. Silence was record. Silence was restraint before movement. Silence allowed every heart to speak before my hand opened what had already been prepared. And soon what they laugh at will stand as proof that what I conceal for a season I never abandon. My child, while you were looking at closed doors and wondering why nothing around you seemed to move, there was secret work happening behind those very doors that you could not enter yet, because what I was doing there needed silence more than explanation. You measured that season by what your eyes could not see, by calls that did not come, by answers that did not arrive, by days that looked almost identical to the days before them, and because the visible world remained still, you assumed perhaps nothing significant was happening. But I tell you now, some of my deepest work begins where human sight loses patience. What looked quiet to you was not inactive. What appeared delayed was not abandoned. Invisible movement was already unfolding in the spiritual realm while you sat inside what felt like ordinary waiting. I was not merely watching from above while you struggled to understand the stillness. I was moving through places you could not reach, touching matters you did not know needed adjustment, redirecting outcomes before they formed against you, and building a future that required more precision than you could measure in that moment. There are times when I do my strongest work where no applause can reach, because visible movement too early often invites interference before foundations are secure. You asked why the answer did not come when you first cried out, but had I released it at your first request, too many unfinished things would have entered with it. There were names still standing in the wrong place, voices still carrying influence they should not have had, doors still connected to people who would have touched what I meant to protect. So I kept certain spaces closed, not because I wanted your heart burdened, but because some blessings cannot survive early exposure. You saw silence, I saw protection. You saw delay, I saw hidden alignment. You saw the absence of proof, I saw invisible preparation that had to be completed before anything visible could safely arrive. Invisible movement in the spiritual realm often feels unfair when you live inside it, because your emotions respond to what they can measure, and what they could measure then was mostly emptiness. You looked around and saw no clear sign that anything had changed. You prayed and waited, then prayed again, and because days continued without obvious evidence, your heart slowly learned how heavy unanswered expectation can become. But while you were counting visible disappointments, I was counting unseen victories already taking place around you. Certain attacks that should have reached you were stopped before they formed fully. Certain opportunities that looked delayed were actually being redirected towards stronger timing. Certain conversations happening far from your awareness were being shaped by my hand so that future doors would open under better conditions than the ones you first imagined. I was arranging people when you thought relationships had become quiet. I was shifting hearts while you believed nothing was changing. There were people I would later connect to your path who first needed their own season of preparation before meeting you. There were names not yet ready to stand near what I planned for your life. Had they entered too early, they would have misunderstood your process and perhaps weakened what I was growing in you. Timing matters because even good connections become harmful when introduced before maturity is present on both sides. So I delayed meetings, slowed responses, and held back certain alignments until the hour could support them. I was also arranging timing in ways your present emotions could not understand. Human hearts often ask for immediate relief because pain makes now feel urgent, but immediate relief is not always safe if tomorrow still carries instability. Some answers must arrive exactly when surrounding conditions can hold them. Too early, and what looks like blessing becomes pressure. Too late, and discouragement grows heavy. So I moved with precision. The answer did not fail to come. It was being carried through exact timing. I knew the hour when certain barriers would weaken, when resistance would lose strength, when hidden opposition would no longer have authority to interfere. You only saw the present day and wondered why it remained unchanged. I saw the larger frame and knew why one more season of silence still protected what belonged to you. Finances too were under my hand while you worried over lack and uncertainty. You thought perhaps nothing was being arranged because visible provision had not yet appeared in the form you expected. Yet there were resources I held back because premature provision sometimes feeds wrong decisions. There were moments when what you asked for financially could have placed you in places not meant for you yet. There were expenses I shielded you from without your knowing. There were losses I prevented that never became visible because they never reached you. Provision is not only what arrives in your hands, it is also what I stop from taking what belongs to your future. Many times you called a season empty because you looked only at what had not yet increased, while missing how much had quietly been preserved. Comment thank you for your unfailing love, Lord, if you've been held by His hands. And share this video.